Hello, welcome to True Crime Talk. This is Kathleen, and today I'm going to be talking about Barbara Bolick, who went missing in July of 2007. She just disappeared off of Bear Creek Overlook in Bitterroot Mountains, Montana. And apparently or supposedly, she just disappeared without a trace. Nobody's ever found anything of her body or her belongings out there in the mountains. And she's never been seen again since that day that she went missing. This article is from Strange Outdoors and it's from December 29th. And it says the puzzling disappearance of Barbara Bolick from the Bitterroot Mountains. And I'm going to put it in reading mode. Just read it from here. It says the puzzling disappearance of Barbara Bolick from the Bitterroot Mountains. This was revised in June of 2024, so let's see what it says. It says, on a seemingly ordinary Wednesday, July 18th, 2007, Barbara Bolick set out for a brief hike near the Bear Creek Overlook in the Bitterroot Mountains, west of Victor, Montana. She was accompanied by Jim Raymaker, a visitor from California, unaware that this hike would plunge them into an unfathomable mystery. At around 11:30 a.m., as they enjoyed the stunning views, Jim paused to take in the scenery. Barbara was only 20 or 30 feet away, just a stone's throw, yet when Jim turned back less than a minute later, she was gone, vanished without a trace. Barbara, an experienced hiker familiar with the terrain, had chosen this trail countless times before. She carried a black day pack with a .357 Magnum pistol inside, a precaution she always took. Despite an exhaustive search effort that followed, neither Barbara nor her belongings were ever found. Even scent dogs, usually so reliable, could not detect any signs of her. Ravalli County Sheriff Chris Hoffman was left baffled, declaring Barbara's disappearance an enigma. The trail, the woods, and the mountains seemed to conspire in silence, holding tightly to their secrets. After retiring from J.P. Morgan Chase, where he worked for 17 years, Carl Bolick relocated to Corvallis in Montana in 2001 with his 55-year-old wife, Barbara Assunta. Carl had been the assistant director of the firm's worldwide security operations. He had been raised in Montana, but Barbara had never lived in the state. However, since she was a keen hiker and a natural athlete, she soon loved her new home, frequently went on long hikes in the nearby Bitterroot Valley, and ran nearly daily. In mid-July 2007, Carl's cousin Donna K. Biles and her 58-year-old boyfriend Jim Raymaker visited the Bolicks in Corvallis. Barbara enjoyed taking visitors on hikes to show them the scenery, especially as Carl had stopped coming along with her after suffering a heart attack. On July 18th, Barbara, Donna, and Jim planned to hike Barbara's favorite trail, the Bear Creek Overlook, a 15-minute drive from her home. Bear Creek Overlook Trail is a 4.5-mile, which is 7.2 kilometers, moderately rated and trafficked out and back trail near Victor, Montana. It features a stunning view of Bear Creek and the surrounding mountains and passes beautiful wildflowers. The trail is best used from March until October and goes through an open forest with low bushes. TheOutbound.com describes the trail as follows. Bear Creek Overlook features a modest day hike that rewards you with visually striking views of the Bitterroot Mountains. Rather than climbing up from the valley foothills, this trail offers a relatively short yet fulfilling ascent. At the start of your hike, stay to left and meander your way through a shaded forest of Douglas fir and lodgepole pine. Your steady uphill climb features about 24 switchbacks with pockets of vibrant wildflowers, and a meadow of fallen trees near the rim. At the top, you'll be greeted with impressive views of the Bitterroot Mountains into the East Bitterroot Valley. If you're lucky, you may get the overlook all to yourself. For a near spiritual experience, plan your summit arrival around sunset and take a seat far enough away from the edge. After absorbing the sensations, be sure to start your descent immediately after the sun dips behind the Bitterroots. A flashlight is a must as it gets dark fast. All in all, about 2 to 3 hours round trip. Parking is limited and be prepared for a windy drive on your way to the trailhead. There are no facilities. which means there are no bathrooms, of course. But when Donna woke up that morning, she found that she was hungover from the alcoholic drinks they'd had the evening before and decided it wouldn't be a good idea for her to go hiking. So Donna, who was Barbara's husband's cousin from California, Donna and her 58-year-old boyfriend, I don't know how old Donna was, I assume maybe around the same age as all the others in her 50s, but Donna, the cousin, and her 58-year-old boyfriend came to visit from California, and they were all three, Donna, Barbara, and Donna's husband boyfriend, her boyfriend, were supposed to go on a hike together. But it ended up, Donna woke up that morning and didn't feel so great because she said she was hungover, so she ended up not going. So just her boyfriend and Barbara went. So it says, however, Barbara and Jim still wanted to go, so at around 8:30 or 9 a.m., Barbara told Carl that she was going with Jim to the Overlook and that they'd be back later for lunch. Whilst the two went hiking, Carl spent the morning working on a carpentry project. That was the last time Carl saw his wife. Barbara was 5 feet tall, weighed 115 pounds, and wore eyeglasses. That day, she wore a pastel-colored shirt with tan shorts. So she was very small. She was, to me, she sounds like she was petite, 5 feet tall, 115 pounds. So she wasn't a large woman at all. I don't know how tall or big of a man Jim was, the person she went hiking with. It says around noon, Donna started to become worried that Barbara and Jim hadn't returned from their hike. But Carl reassured her that his wife was experienced and knew the area well, that there was nothing to worry about. He was confident that they'd likely be back very soon. Furthermore, he told Donna that Barbara was always cautious and always brought a backpack containing food, water, and a .357 Magnum revolver for protection against bears, mountain lions, rattlesnakes, and moose. But by early afternoon, Barbara and Jim still hadn't shown up, and Donna asked Carl to call somebody to check on them. He was about to call when the phone rang at around 2 p.m. Carl said, "It was a Forest Service law enforcement officer. She asked me if my wife's name was Barbara, and I instantly thought something terrible had happened." Carl was stunned. Recalling the events, he said, "You know what I said? I said, BS, I thought if anyone was lost, it was her hiking companion." He learned that Jim had reported Barbara missing, and Carl immediately drove to the area near the Bear Creek Overlook Trail, hoping that his wife would have been located by the time he got there, but she was nowhere to be found. Jim Raymaker said they had hiked the entire Bear Creek Overlook and then stopped to eat. They had met two young men on the trail and had chatted to them for roughly half an hour. Jim and Barbara started to head back to the trailhead at around 11:30 a.m., although it could have been later, and at one point Jim stopped to look back at the view. He said that he did this for no more than 45 seconds before turning around and finding that Barbara, who had been 20 to 30 feet ahead of him then, had vanished. When I turned back to continue heading down, Barbara was nowhere to be seen. Jim scoured the area looking for Barbara while calling out her name, but there was no sign of either Barbara or her backpack. She had vanished into thin air. It was strange, since there was a lot of loose shell rock around the Bear Creek Overlook Trail, and it would have made it difficult to move about quietly. If she had fallen over the overlook, it would be expected that Jim would have heard something such as a scream or a cry for help. He gave up his search, headed back to the trailhead, and found construction workers there as the road leading to the trailhead was closed for maintenance that day. Jim asked if they'd seen Barbara and briefly described her, but they hadn't come across her. But they did recall seeing two young men with a black and white dog leave the trail earlier. Jim reported Barbara missing shortly after this. Carl stayed at Bear Creek Overlook until midnight on July 18th, but search teams encouraged him to return home and get some rest. The following day, he returned with friends and neighbors. Several ground search and rescue teams scoured the area, accompanied by search dogs and aircraft using infrared and thermal imaging. But no trace of Barbara or her backpack was found, and the dogs could not pick up her scent. After 2 weeks of intensive searching and investigation, Ravalli County Sheriff Chris Hoffman said Barbara Bolick's disappearance was a mystery. Speaking at the time, "We are perplexed. We have combed the area in the vicinity of the disappearance very well, No trace at all has been found. We would like to verify, if we can, that Bolick was even on the mountain that day. Hoffman, a law enforcement veteran with a career spanning over 30 years, said, "It's something that I don't think we go a week thinking about. We don't like mysteries, we like cold facts, and we want to get to the bottom of it." Furthermore, during an interview with Missoula Independent, he said, "I would say that law enforcement who worked closest with Carl during that time grieved with Carl and the rest of the family." Jim reported to the county sheriff about the two men they'd spoken to on the trail, and law enforcement attempted to locate them and even offered a $10,000 reward. The men were in their early 20s, accompanied by a black mixed breed dog with floppy ears and white markings. One was described as dark-skinned with black hair, and the other had a medium complexion and reddish hair. Both men were clean-cut, and they each had an athletic build. They may have driven a light-colored older Chevrolet S10 SUV with Missoula County, Montana license plates. But they could not be found. Publicity about Barbara's disappearance was sparse, so perhaps they were not aware she had gone missing and did not contact the authorities. Other witnesses, including the construction crew, confirmed the men were on the trail. Lead investigator Penny Johnson said, "It's hard to creep across loose shell rock. You'd make some noise. Just the fact that someone simply disappears like that is a cause for concern. If Barbara had ventured from the trail or fallen over the cliff edge, it seems odd that Jim heard nothing." It has also been suggested that Barbara might have fallen suddenly and not had time to call out. However, her fear of heights made her especially careful around them. This was her favorite trail, and she was very familiar with it, so an accidental stumble seemed unlikely. Neither her remains nor pack have ever been found, despite scent dogs being deployed and many hours of official and unofficial searches. If she slipped unexpectedly, she may have been trapped in a crevice or cave, but it is odd if this happened she has never been located. Was Barbara abducted and murdered in a random attack and then removed from the scene with no trace? Could Jim have murdered her and hidden her body well enough in an area with which he was unfamiliar that she'd never be found? It seems unlikely. Jim was a trusted family acquaintance, but perhaps he made sexual advances on Barbara on or before the hike. There was a struggle, and he killed her. Since no scent was found, maybe something happened before they arrived at the Bitterroot Valley. However, it's unclear what Jim's motive would have been to murder Barbara, especially as they hardly knew each other and he was in a happy relationship with Donna. Perhaps a hiking disappearance was a cover-up for Barbara's previous death, and the group colluded together. If so, why would Jim use such a cover story that involved the authorities? Raymaker cooperated with law enforcement from the beginning and offered to take a polygraph test before returning to his home in California. But this was never done. He was quickly cleared of any involvement in the disappearance. During an interview with the Missoula Independent, Raymaker said he was frustrated about the lack of closure in the case. He reiterated what he told law enforcement: "I never laid a hand on Barbara. I never harmed her in any way," and furthermore said, "I've had a cloud over my head since 2007. The police received many dubious tips over the investigation, including one that said Barbara was abducted by a ghostly mountain man. David Paulides, the author of the Missing 411 books and movies, said, "I know the case extremely well. I actually interviewed the man she was with. It's probably 6 or 7 years ago. Some people believe it's pure criminal. I haven't formed an opinion." Did Barbara decide to leave her life behind with Carl and start over somewhere else? That's with the other theories. There is nothing to support this possibility, and Barbara's wallet and identity documents were left at home and bank accounts untouched. Carl had planned an upcoming fall trip to the Mexican Riviera, for which they were both excited. There was no evidence of a bear or mountain lion attack. If a wild animal had attacked Barbara, there would have been some drag marks, blood, or tissue of that in the area. Jim would have heard screaming or sounds of a struggle. Donna suggested to other family members that Barbara could have committed suicide. But on hearing the rumors, Carl refused to speak to either Donna or Jim. It caused a huge family rift. So this is what this place is: Strange Outdoors, the weird side of the outdoors internet site has to say about this case. A lot of theories out there on the internet regarding this case. As you can imagine, a lot of people are suspicious about the husband, the cousin Donna, and of course, the last person to be with Barbara, Jim Raymaker. A lot of people are very suspicious of him. A lot of people are suspicious of all three of them. Some people are suspicious of Donna and Jim. Some people are suspicious of the husband and Donna and Jim. And then some people are suspicious of the so-called witnesses who were apparently there on that day that she went missing. Apparently, the only people there that day or around the time that Jim and Barbara were supposedly there were Barbara and Jim, construction workers somewhere out there working on the roadway somehow. I forget exactly what they were doing. And then these two men and a dog in the early 20s. And as you can see in this picture on the screen, this one man who both Jim Raymaker, the man who was hiking with Barbara, and the construction workers who were there all said that they saw these other two men that Jim said he saw. So I guess we could assume that Jim's not lying about seeing these two men there, because there are other witnesses, independent witnesses of Jim, who apparently did not know Jim, who said that they saw two men hiking there also. One of them looked to be in his early 20s, male, black hair, dark skin, average athletic build, and there's a sketch of him right here. Then the other person with him was a white male in his early 20s with reddish hair, clean cut, slender, athletic build. And apparently they couldn't get a sketch of him. Nobody really looked at him too good, I guess, and could give a sketch of him. But they said he had reddish hair and he was white in his early 20s, clean cut. And so apparently these two young men who are out there hiking were with a dog, and they have a picture. And this is a dog that's similar to the dog that was seen out there with these two men. And this supposedly up here is a vehicle that's similar to the light colored SUV that people saw, I guess Jim and the construction workers saw with these two men. There's two men, a dog, and apparently they were in this vehicle, a vehicle like this. Now, regarding these two witnesses, uh, some people think they could have been locals and they just didn't want to get involved, so they never came forward to police. Some people think they were just in town visiting. There was apparently a race in the area, I forget exactly what for, but somewhere in the area there's a race, a road race, and maybe they were participants in that or there for that event, and then they decided to go on a hike. So apparently there was these two other young men there that day, and they've never been identified. They've never came forward. If they were there, and I suppose they were there if the construction workers are correct, because we can't just take Jim's word for it because he was the last one to see Barbara. But if other witnesses, independent of Jim, said they saw Barbara there with Jim, or or saw, excuse me, if other witness, independent of Jim, said they saw these two young men there in the park area, then apparently these two young men were in fact there. There were two young men there hiking, and for whatever reason, they just didn't come forward, or they don't keep up with the news. They didn't know that they were being searched for. They could have just been visitors. They could have even been from another country, for all we know. And then they went back home and never thought anything about it, never saw any news stories about this, didn't know that they were being looked for. That's possible because this was in 2007, and the internet, social media maybe wasn't as big as it is today. And also, maybe they just don't keep up with the news or social media or the internet is, you know, so who knows why they didn't come forward, but it could be they don't know anything about it, or it could be some people think they could have been locals and they just didn't want to get involved, or they could have been from, anywhere in the US and they just didn't want to get involved. So some people, their theories involve that didn't come forward because they don't trust law enforcement. And some people who live in that area say a lot of people there don't trust law enforcement and they just don't get involved. They just don't come forward, which is awful. But also maybe they think they don't have anything to say. Maybe they didn't see Barbara, so why should we contact law enforcement and get involved when we didn't see her and they don't want to be accused of anything? Maybe they're afraid to come forward. This is the area where Barbara supposedly was last seen in. This is the Bear Creek Overlook area in the Bitterroot Mountains, Montana. And this is the trail right here. The overlook, the top, where the red dot is where they were hiking to, and they're coming from down here where the green dot is. As you can see, kind of a winding, switchbacking trail. I mean, it goes one way then the other. But according to Barbara's husband, Carl, and her family and friends, they said that she was very familiar with this area, very familiar with this trail. So how could she end up getting lost on this trail? That if she was an experienced hiker, she would know to stay on the trail and that there would be no reason for her to go off trail, especially when she's there with Jim and she's supposed to be showing him the area and he doesn't know the area like she does, apparently. This is a picture of the area too. Now, as you can see, the trees, there are trees and foliage, but it's not like other areas. So people say that it would be very hard for searchers not to be able to find something if she was indeed in this area, that they should have been able to find something. And so, they didn't find her clothing, her backpack. They looked from the air. Searchers on the ground didn't find anything. Searchers from the air didn't spot anything out here. And it's kind of a sparse area as far as trees and foliage. People think that if she was out there, she would have been seen, she would have been seen against the background of these rocks. If she was laying out here or she fell off a ridge or cliff or something, that they would have seen her. Now, I do see that, there are waterways here. I don't know how well these areas were searched. I mean, sure, anybody can get lost anywhere if they wander off, but what reason would she have to wander off so far away? Some theories are, that I've read on the internet, are that Barbara had to use the restroom, and so she went to find, a tree or bush somewhere that was hidden enough where she could have privacy to use the restroom. And she didn't tell Jim because she just, wanted, to keep her dignity or privacy or whatever. So she just, while he was, I guess, behind looking at the view, she goes off to use the restroom and she ends up getting lost, even though she knows the area very well. Well, to me, how far out would you go to use the restroom? I mean, in July, she wouldn't have, she knows the area, so why would she go far, far away, risking getting lost to use the restroom? Just, go far enough in, look, make sure nobody's around, and do what you got to do, and then come back out and get back with Jim. So that's one theory people have, is that she went to use the restroom and got lost, and she just didn't tell Jim and she's going to the bathroom out of privacy or whatever. But I would think an experienced hiker would just say, hey, I've got to go use the restroom. She doesn't have to go into detail, just, I'm going to go find some private area and use the restroom. Because remember, there aren't any public facilities up there. So maybe she did, and somehow she ended up getting lost. But I would think that if she did that, she would just say, hey, Jim, because he's never been there before. She wouldn't want him to wander off and get lost. You just stay where you are. I'm going to go use the restroom and I'll be back. I mean, would it really be? I mean, I know some people can be very, women especially, maybe too embarrassed to say something like that to a man. I don't know how well she knew Jim. How well did Donna know her boyfriend Jim? How long had they been together? How well did Carl know Donna's boyfriend Jim? I know he, of course, knew his cousin Donna probably all his life, obviously, but how many years was Donna with Jim? How many years did Carl and Barbara know Jim? And for that matter, how many years had Carl and Barbara been married? Did they have children and possibly grandchildren, or did Carl marry Barbara later in his life and he already had, like, an ex-wife and she's like a second wife, and Barbara possibly had stepchildren that are her husband Carl's children, but not hers? Did Barbara herself have any children? I don't know the answers to those questions. But so one theory was that Barbara went off to use the restroom. Another theory is that Barbara never made it here to this park, to this overlook, or the Bitterroot Mountain. She never made it to go on a hike. In other words, some people think, a theory that some people have is that Jim did something to Barbara on the drive up to this area to take their hike that I think is about a 15-minute drive from Carl and Barbara's home, and that something happened to Barbara on the way up here, and that Jim just totally lied and said that he just went along with what the original plan was to go here, and he just said, we went hiking and I turned around, she was gone. But actually something happened in the vehicle on the way up there. I don't know who was driving. I assume it was Barbara because she knows the area, but maybe Jim could have been driving for her and she just said, it's this way, because she knows the area. She can just direct them which way to go. So I don't know who was driving. Now, also, I don't know if the police looked at the vehicle that they came in. I mean, they might have looked at it, but did they do like a deep dive search of the vehicle? Did they test it for blood, DNA, or whatever? I don't know what kind of vehicle it was. Was it a car or SUV? Did they look in the trunk? Did they thoroughly search that vehicle to make sure that nothing sinister happened in the vehicle? I don't know if police did that, but I haven't heard anything, and I assume the police looked at all angles of this. I assume that the police just didn't look at the park and listen to Jim's word. I assume that they investigated, but I don't know exactly how well they investigated the vehicle that they came in to make sure that there wasn't evidence of blood or anything, or a struggle or something. Because remember, apparently Barbara always went hiking with her .357 Magnum, according to her husband Carl, and they never found her backpack or her gun that apparently, I believe, she carried in the backpack. So could something have happened? An accident, maybe? Jim accidentally shot her? Was Jim playing with the gun, or did he have his backpack in his lap and playing with the gun? Or some people think that he made passes at her and she rejected him and he got mad and beat her to death, or possibly maybe used her gun on her, shot her to death, and then disposed of her body in an area not the Bear Creek Overlook area, because he knew authorities would be looking there once he told them that she went missing from there. So he hid her body somewhere else and then went here, made sure that the construction workers saw him, made sure that he was seen by those two young men who he says he saw and the construction workers said they saw. But remember, the construction workers, and this is a question I have, the construction workers never saw Barbara. Of course, Jim spoke to the construction workers and asked them if they had seen Barbara, because this was supposedly after she disappeared, and so he was looking for her. And the construction workers and Jim both saw the two young men, but Jim's the only one who said he saw Barbara in that park that day. Nobody else has come forward to say that they saw Barbara with Jim or alone in the Bear Creek Overlook Bitterroot Mountains, Montana area that day. No other witnesses whatsoever. There aren't any witnesses to say that, to my knowledge, that they saw her and Jim driving in a vehicle together. They didn't stop at a gas station, or, there's no witnesses at all to say that this whole story of Barbara and Jim going to the mountain together is true at all, other than Carl and his cousin Donna saying that that's where Jim and Barbara went, and Jim saying that's where they went, and that's where she went missing from. So the only witnesses we have are Carl, his cousin Donna, and Jim, who was the person on the hike with her. Those are the only witnesses who saw Barbara. So that's the questions I have, where it makes you think foul play could be involved, is because nobody else saw her at the park but Jim. But, the construction workers are there doing a construction job. They're not looking for anybody. They're not looking at people, paying attention to people. And those two young hikers never came forward, those two young men. And maybe they were scared to come forward because they didn't want to be accused of doing something to this woman, Barbara. Or some people think maybe the two young hikers did something to Barbara. Maybe while Jim wasn't paying attention, he was, looking at the scene. Some people think that maybe they kidnapped her, you know, very quickly. She's a small woman. Remember, she's 5 feet tall, 115 pounds, and maybe they took off with her in their vehicle. But there are no witnesses to that, and nobody, not even Jim, said he heard a scream or anything. No, no sign of a struggle, no sounds of a struggle, nothing like that. And so, I don't think the two young men hiking with their dog, I think they were just regular hikers enjoying the park. I don't think they had anything to do with Barbara's disappearance. Now, why they didn't come forward could have been fear, or they just don't know anything that people are looking for them. They have no clue. Who knows where they're from and what news or that they're listening to, and maybe they've just never known that they were being looked for. And then some people think if they were from the area, it could be that they just don't trust the police and they didn't see Barbara, so they have nothing to offer. So why bother getting involved when we didn't see nothing, we don't know anything, so we're not going to contact the authorities. So that's possible. So the suspicious things to me are that Jim says he turned away for 40, 45 seconds, whatever, to look at a view, and that she was ahead of him and she just disappeared that quickly. So if she didn't just, sneak off for her privacy to use the restroom, maybe she wasn't feeling well, and so she went further than she might have if she just had to urinate or something and she's sick to her stomach and she just wanted to find a area to use the restroom. I still think maybe she would have motioned to him or something, like, hey, I'm going in the woods or something to use the restroom. I don't know, unless she just got suddenly sick to her stomach and just had to go, and he was up there and he wasn't going to be able to hear her, and she wanted to go find a private area, and she knows the area, so she thought she'd just go take care of business and come right back, and he would still be on the trail, and they finished their hike. So that's possible, I guess, but it just doesn't seem likely to me of how things would have happened. But I don't know how well she knew Jim. Was she awkward with Jim? Or she was like, this is my husband's cousin's boyfriend who we've known for years and years, and so, hey, Jim, I got to go in the woods and take care of business. So would she have said something like that, or would she just have walked off and not said anything to him? And that's how she ended up disappearing and then got lost, and they just have never found her, because it does happen where people go missing in the woods, forest, and they're never found for whatever reasons, and then they succumb to starvation or the elements or whatever, or an animal gets them, but they're so far away, they're not in the search area, the original search area, because they wander off, and I guess it's human nature, you just keep going, you don't stop. But also, if she was an experienced hiker and she went to the woods to use the restroom and she did get lost, would she panic and freak out and just keep going? Or would she just stop and sit down and let somebody find her? Wouldn't an experienced hiker know to stay in one spot? If you have something in your backpack or something to help people find you, to use that. Um, it was broad daylight, morning hours. They're supposed to be back home by lunch. It just seems odd for an experienced hiker, unless she totally panicked, something scared her, why she just wouldn't stay in one spot and wait to be found, or to come, maybe to think, which way should I go? Did she have, I know she had food and water, a gun and stuff in her backpack, but did she have a compass, a cell phone? This was 2007. I think they actually have self-service at this area now, but I don't know what was happening in 2007. I assume not, because if she was safety conscious, I assume that she would have had a cell phone on her. But of course, cell phones in 2007 are very different than today. They didn't have all the capabilities. It could have just been a regular cell phone with no, not a smartphone, no GPS or internet and stuff like that. Obviously, she didn't have a satellite phone or anything, I assume. And those things wouldn't necessarily be helpful unless you're conscious and can use them, or they're able to track you with them. Like today, like, they can track your cell phone possibly, but back then, maybe not so. And obviously, she was never found. So obviously, none of that was going on back then. Obviously, she didn't have something on her where they could trace her, because they never found anything of her. And I've never heard anybody say that she had something that they could track on her person. But it's still possible to get lost. And instead of stopping in one spot and saying, I don't know which way I'm going, but maybe she kept walking because she thought she was going in the right direction. And she realized, oh no, I don't see the trail. I'm getting further away. Or she just thought she knew the area so well that she would come out somewhere where people would be, where she could get help, or where a road would be. And then she could, get back to Jim that way. She could stop a car and say, hey, I got lost and I walked out here. Something like that. But because otherwise it just seems odd to me why she just didn't stay in one place if she experienced. But maybe that's just not human nature. Like if you get lost, you just automatically, you don't want people to have to come searching for you. You just want to find your way out. It's just a simple day hike. It wasn't supposed to be some big drama where you get lost and now people got to come find you. And she didn't want people to have to come find her or get hurt trying to search for her. So she just kept trying to find her own way back to the trail. And she ended up and got further lost. And then she was out of the search area where they thought she would be when they were searching for her. And so she just succumbed to the elements or dehydration or something like that. So that's the theory, is that she just got lost using the restroom or whatever. And then there's the foul play where people think Jim did something to her in the car before they got there. A question I have is, why did Donna not go on the hike with them? And why didn't Jim say, okay, well, Donna's not feeling well, so can we wait till later in the afternoon to go on the hike? Or can we go tomorrow morning instead? I don't know how long Donna and Jim were going to be in town, but couldn't they have went another day, Thursday or Friday, or just Jim just not go at all? I mean, I know he probably wanted to see it, and I know Barbara was, excited about it. Barbara loved the outdoors and hiking, and she loved to show people the areas, very beautiful area. And when they have people come visit them, she probably wants to show them all the area because she thinks it's so beautiful. But was Donna really that hungover, or in other words, why would that just, like, why would Donna just let her boyfriend go off with Barbara alone? Like, that's why people have this theory that Donna and Jim had something to do with Barbara's disappearance. I don't know what the motive would be. I don't know how long Barbara and Donna knew each other. Donna was Carl's cousin, not Barbara's cousin. I don't know if they had some kind of disagreements in the past, if there was something going on in the family and there's anger between them or something. And I don't know how long Donna knew Jim, and I don't know how long Barbara and Carl knew Jim, the boyfriend. I know Barbara was about 55. The boyfriend, Jim, was 58. But it just seems to me, but of course, hindsight's 2020, and it could just be just, nobody thought anything of this. Like Barbara's husband said, it's just a regular hike for her, no big deal. They just go do this hike and she'd be home by lunch. That nobody thought anything of it. But from us looking at it years later, and we don't know these people and we're not there, we're thinking, well, why would Donna, the girlfriend of Jim, not just tell them to wait until the afternoon when she felt better, or wait till the next morning so that they could go together? Because Carl's not going to go. Remember, Carl, the husband, has had a heart attack recently. So he's going to stay home and do his carpentry projects or whatever. He's retired. He's not going to go on this hike with Barbara. He doesn't go hiking with Barbara anymore, apparently. So, but maybe Donna, I don't know how old Donna was or what her health conditions was. Maybe she didn't like hiking. She didn't like the outdoors. She didn't have no interest in it. So she just said, oh, I'm hungover. I don't want to go. And Jim knew that she would never want to go because she didn't want to do that anyway. And so if his only chance to go on this hike was to go then with Barbara, because Donna didn't really want to go. So there's no sense in waiting for Donna to feel better, because she wasn't going on the hike because she didn't want to go on the hike, not because she was hungover or whatever. Maybe Donna just said that to be polite. Well, I don't want to go because I'm feeling kind of sick, so y'all just go ahead. And Barbara was enthusiastic, so Jim went ahead and they went on this hike. And what happened. Maybe he's telling the truth, that he just turned away less than a minute and she was gone. But I just think it's kind of odd that Jim and Barbara would go together without Donna. But some people aren't into this or physically capable of that, so capable of hiking. So I guess it's maybe not so suspicious. But then we learn that Donna thinks it's possible that Barbara harmed herself. That's possible. I don't know how she thinks she harmed herself. Like she went somewhere far away and used her gun on herself, or she jumped off a cliff or drowned herself in a water area or something. I don't know how they think she harmed herself, but what makes Donna think that? And Carl didn't think that. Was it Carl in denial? Did he not understand his wife was going through a depression or something? Or he didn't want to face it? Or is Donna just totally making that up because she knows something sinister happened to Barbara that day? Did she know that Jim did something to her? Did Donna and Jim have a reason to do something to her? Could it be possible that Carl hired Jim to do something to his wife? What motive would he have? Were they having problems? Did he have a love interest on the side? Um, I don't know what was going on in their marriage. Apparently, the police never suspected Carl, the husband, and they didn't suspect Jim. But they never gave him a polygraph test. But he said that he did offer to take one, but they never gave him one. Was he just offering, to look innocent? He's just real good at playing the innocent person, or did he actually is innocent and he just offered to help in any way he could because he felt bad that he went hiking with this woman and he came back home alone. And another thing that I find suspicious, and a lot of people do too, is that how could she go missing in such a quick time? As Jim said, like he said, he turned around 40 or 45 seconds and she was gone. And some people say, well, he's lying. Well, it could be that he had nothing to do with her disappearance or death or anything like that, but that he felt so bad that he was with her when she ended up disappearing, that he just wanted Carl, the husband, to know that, hey, I just turned around and she was gone. Like he didn't want to say, well, I went into the woods to use the restroom and I was gone for so minutes, or I let her go ahead because I wanted to sit down and just look at the view and I don't know where she went. maybe it was longer. Maybe he turned away from her for a long time. Maybe they separated. She kept walking, but maybe he couldn't keep up with her if she was more fit than he was, and so he lagged behind, and he didn't want to say, "Hey, Carl, I wasn't with your wife. I separated from her, or I let her go way ahead, or I sat down and looked at the view for a long time." Maybe he was just sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes and not 40 seconds. But when he realized she was missing and he couldn't find her, he panics and he couldn't find her. So he asked the construction workers and then he reports her missing, but he didn't want to say, "Hey, Carl," or tell the police, the rescuers, that he actually left her for a great deal of time. So maybe he fibbed about that. Like maybe he had nothing to do with her disappearance, but he fibbed with how long that he he didn't know where she was. He fibbed about, like, who knows? It could have been 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes that he didn't know where she was, and he felt bad because they were supposed to be hiking together. Maybe he got ahead of her. He said that she was ahead of him, I believe, and that he turned to look at the view one last time, less than a minute, and when he turned back, she was gone. But could it have been the other way around? She lagged behind, and he was way ahead. Maybe he's just a fast walker, enthusiastic. He's never been there before, and he just, the according to him, the walking back down is when she disappeared, I believe. So could that be when she went missing? And could it be that those two young men were still there in that area at the time, or had they already left? So I believe Jim said that him and Barbara spoke to those two young men, but those two young men have never come forward or been found. And the construction workers didn't see Barbara. So was Barbara ever really there? The dogs didn't seem to think Barbara was ever there. Dogs never found her, and they've never found a dead body. And no person has ever found a dead body of Barbara or anything that belonged to her up there. So I just hope that the authorities searched her vehicle very well that they drove up in and made sure there wasn't any evidence of crimes in the vehicle. And I just hope they researched Jim's background very well to see if he had any type of criminal record that maybe even Donna didn't know about. I would like to know how long Barbara and Carl knew Jim. Was that the first time they ever met him, or had they visited with him before in person? Maybe they visited Donna, the cousin, in California, or how well, they go to family events or whatever, how long Donna had been with Jim. So the theories are foul play, that Jim, or a combination of Jim and Donna, or Jim, Donna, and Carl, the husband, did something or conspired to do something to Barbara for whatever reason. It would usually involve greed or love. Maybe Carl had another love interest, so he paid Donna and Jim to do something. And so Donna knew about it, but she didn't want to be there when it happened. So that's how Jim and Barbara ended up going alone, and Barbara was going off with an enemy and she didn't know it. And maybe Carl knew that the authorities would be searching the heck out of the Bear Creek Overlook area if they said that she went missing there. So they made sure to put her body somewhere where it wouldn't be found, so there would be no evidence found that she was indeed murdered and not just had an accident or lost or harmed herself or something. Because her gun has never been found, and she's never been found. Her backpack's never been found. So it just seems like she wasn't in the area that day. But people go missing all the time, and searchers just don't find their bodies for whatever reason. And then years later, they'll find a body and realize it was in this area that they already searched. They just missed it for whatever reason. But this area, people say, is a lot less forested than other areas. So people say that if she was there, she would have been found. But then some people say, well, she could have, fallen into a crevice or, be in a cave somewhere or something like that. And that's why she just hasn't been found yet or was never found. And her bones have been, dispersed by wildlife. And so they're just not ever going to find her. But the area, they searched it, it seems like very well. I have is that Barbara chose to disappear on purpose. I think that's the least likely thing to have happened because she didn't take anything with her that she would need it, and she would have had to have planned this out very well and had somebody to come pick her up and take her away and have funds hidden somewhere that she could survive on. And in this day and age and in 2007, if you're going to live a regular kind of life, you're going to need some kind of identification and stuff. And if you use your social security number for a job or banking or whatever, that's one way authorities could find you. So you completely have to go off grid and just live in a cabin somewhere or be a homeless person wandering around, not using any kind of government services, or at least not using your legal name or information in government services and stuff like that. Not drive a car. I mean, she would have been arrested possibly for driving without a license if she was going around without a license for years and years. So I don't see that as a possibility, and there's no information that she was unhappy in life or that she thought about disappearing or doing harm to herself. But of course, it's always possible. But if I mean, seems like she was a pretty decent person. I mean, I don't know. We don't have a lot of information on these people, but it seems like she wasn't the kind of person who's going to use her husband's cousin's boyfriend as a ruse and let him be left behind while she plans this elaborate hoax to get away, to just disappear and make people think that she's lost in the forest there, or that she's the type of person, if she wants to harm herself, that she wouldn't bring Jim into it. Why would she bring Jim into it? I think it would be much more likely that Jim could be somebody sinister who did something bad to her rather than her doing something sinister and using Jim as part of the ruse. Because if she harmed herself or disappeared on her own, she wouldn't want to include Jim, some guy she didn't know, in it, would she? Unless she's not a criminal. Like if she murdered Jim or did something to Jim, then I say, yeah, she's the kind of person who would do something like that. But Jim's fine and dandy and alive. She's the one missing. And it just doesn't seem like she would just decide to set up this elaborate hoax, go on a hike, and then use that as her time to harm herself or to disappear. And there's no evidence of that either. If she wanted to harm herself in that area, she was never found. So did she know the area so well that she hiked to an area, used her gun, or did she take pills or something with her in her backpack and use them to just lay down and harm herself? Anything's possible, but she has never been found. And how well does she know the area? Did she know where hidden caves were and stuff like that? But why would she do that to Jim? You know, wouldn't she know that if she gets lost, people might blame Jim or something? I mean, so it just seems unlikely that she would be the kind of person to do that. But then again, we don't know these people. So anything's possible. But I think the least likely is that she harmed herself or disappeared on purpose. I think either she just accidentally got lost and for whatever reason they haven't found her, because that does happen, or there was some kind of foul play involving Jim. Or it could just be that Jim didn't give all the actual facts due to embarrassment or shame because he was the last person with her and he just hated to tell Carl that he didn't know what happened to her. Maybe he's separated from her from a long time. He's a man. He thinks, "Oh, I can do my own thing. I don't have to be with her. She knows this area. She's an experienced hiker. I'll just go off and do my own thing." And then he ends up not being able to find her because he went away from her purposely, and now he can't get back with her. He's not lost, but he can't find her, and apparently she's lost because maybe she thought he got lost and she went looking for him. And then something happened. And apparently cell phones weren't available to call each other, like, "Hey Jim, this is Barbara, where you at?" Or, "Hey Barbara, this is Jim, where are you at?" Or, "Hey Carl, your cousin's boyfriend left me. Where, have you heard from him? Where'd he go?" So apparently cell phones weren't a thing in this area at the time, although I think today they do have cell service in this area, I think. So I guess that's the best I can come up with in my theories, is that she accidentally got lost and they just didn't find her for whatever reason, or Jim, possibly Donna, know more than what they're saying. I like to think that Carl honestly had no idea what happened to her, unless he was just part of this elaborate conspiracy. He just played the part real well. He stayed out there till midnight that first day just playing the part. But people say that he was devastated for the rest of his life. He's deceased now. I don't know how much older he was than Barbara or if he was the same age as Barbara, but he's deceased now. So hopefully they're reunited again if that's what they want to be. But that's the best I can come up with, is that she accidentally got lost, or Donna and Jim were lying, or at least Jim was lying. Because this is an odd mystery. They haven't found anything, and even after all these years, 2025, she went missing 2007, no other hikers or searchers or workers, anybody have ever found anything of her. So in this area, like I said, isn't as bad as some other areas where people go missing, you're never going to find them. It seems like it's possible to find somebody in this area unless somebody purposely hid their bodies or they purposely disappeared. So anyway, this is the Barbara Bolick missing persons case. She went missing on a Wednesday, July 18th, 2007, from Bear Creek Overlook in Bitterroot Mountains, Montana. I think she'd be about 71 years old today if she was still alive. But I don't believe she is out there somewhere living her best life, just decided to get away from Carl and used his cousins as a ruse to have his cousin's boyfriend as a ruse to have an excuse to disappear. Left Jim there alone to take all this heat, and she just went on to live her best life. I don't think that's what happened. It'd be better than the alternatives, but I don't think that's what happened. But this is Barbara here in this picture. I guess this big picture with the blonde highlights is when she was younger, I guess. Then over here is just like driver's license or passport photos, these top two. But she has been missing since 2007, and nobody has a clue as to what happened to her other than she wandered off at Bear Creek Overlook area and got lost, and she's never been found.